to our channel, where we bring you 3 chilling stories that will make you think twice about wandering into a cemetery alone. As the sun began to set, a group of teenagers made their way through the old cemetery. They were all laughing and joking, trying to scare each other with stories of ghosts and ghouls. But as they walked deeper into the graveyard, the mood began to change. The air grew colder, and the trees cast eerie shadows on the headstones. Suddenly, one of the group tripped and fell onto a gravestone, knocking over a vase of flowers. As they picked themselves up, they noticed something strange. The flowers had landed on a gravestone with their friend's name on it. But that couldn't be possible, they thought. Their friend was right beside them. As they looked around, they realized that all of the headstones had their names on them. They were surrounded by their own graves. And that's when they heard the laughter. It was a sinister cackle that echoed through the cemetery. The group turned to run, but they found that they were trapped. The gates of the cemetery were locked tight. Slowly, the ground began to shake, and the headstones started to rise from the earth. The group screamed in terror as they were surrounded by the walking dead. The laughter grew louder and louder until it was deafening. And then, everything went black. The next morning, the police found the group huddled together in the cemetery, their bodies cold and lifeless. The cause of death was never determined. But some say that if you listen closely on a quiet night, you can still hear the sound of that sinister laughter echoing through the cemetery. There was a small cemetery tucked away in the woods, surrounded by dense trees that seemed to go on forever. The local legend said that strange things happened there, and people who went to visit never returned the same. One night, a group of friends decided to explore the cemetery, curious about the rumors they had heard. They walked past the rusted iron gates and down the winding path to the graves, their flashlights barely illuminating the dark surroundings. As they approached a large mausoleum, they heard a faint whisper coming from inside. They stopped in their tracks, frozen with fear, as the whisper grew louder and more distinct. Suddenly, the door to the mausoleum creaked open, and a figure emerged from the darkness. It was a woman, dressed in a tattered white dress, with long black hair covering her face. She moved towards them slowly, and they could hear the sound of her bare feet slapping against the ground. As she got closer, they could see that her skin was a sickly gray color, and her eyes glowed red in the darkness. The group tried to run, but their legs felt heavy, as if they were rooted to the spot. The woman's cold, clammy hand touched one of them, and they felt a surge of fear unlike anything they had ever experienced before. They managed to break free from her grip and run back to their car, never looking back. But when they got home, they realized that they had all been marked with a strange symbol on their skin, a symbol that resembled a cross with an X through it. From that day on, strange things began to happen to them. They would wake up in the middle of the night to hear whispers in their ears, and they would see the woman's ghostly figure lurking outside their windows. They knew then that they had made a grave mistake by going to the cemetery, and they would never be the same again. It was a small, old cemetery nestled in the woods on the outskirts of a small town. The townsfolk avoided the cemetery, believing it to be cursed and haunted by the spirits of those who had been buried there. One night, a group of teenagers decided to explore the cemetery and see if the rumors were true. They walked along the winding path, their flashlights illuminating the way. As they walked deeper into the cemetery, they noticed that the gravestones seemed to be getting older and more worn down. The air grew colder, and a thick fog rolled in, obscuring their vision. Suddenly, they heard a sound, like a low growl, coming from one of the graves. They approached the grave cautiously, shining their flashlights on the headstone. To their horror, they saw that the grave was empty, with no casket or remains inside. As they turned to leave, they realized that the path they had taken to enter the cemetery was now blocked by an impenetrable wall of thorns. They were trapped inside the cemetery, surrounded by the decaying graves and the restless spirits that inhabited them. The teenagers tried to find a way out, but the fog was so thick that they couldn't see more than a few feet in front of them. They could hear whispers and moans coming from the darkness, and the sound of footsteps approaching them from all sides. Suddenly, one of the teenagers disappeared, snatched away by an unseen force. The others ran in panic, trying to find a way out, but the cemetery seemed to stretch on forever, with no end in sight. Days later, a search party found the bodies of the teenagers scattered throughout the cemetery. They had been torn apart by an unknown force, their remains scattered among the old, decaying graves. The cemetery was sealed off, and the townsfolk avoided it even more fervently than before. To this day, the cemetery remains abandoned and haunted, a place of darkness and terror that no one dares to enter.